Good evening. Thank you for attending tonight's Public Safety Committee hearing to discuss the City of Columbus taxicab moratorium. Just a reminder, any person who takes any action to obstruct or interfere with the conduct of tonight's meeting may be charged with disturbing a lawful meeting pursuant to Columbus City Code 2317.12, and any person who enters the area of City Council chambers reserved for city officials or invited guests may be charged with criminal trespass pursuant to Columbus City Code 2311.21. Copies of tonight's agenda are available at the entrance of council chambers. Tonight, the Support Services section of the Department of Public Safety will provide information in regards to their recommendation for the taxicab moratorium. I'm Councilmember Mitchell Brown, and I'm joined by Councilmember Emmanuel Remy. I would now like to invite Public Safety Deputy Director Kate Pisciotti to provide a staff presentation of this evening's proposal. Director Pisciotti.
Good evening, Safety Chair Brown and members of council. We are pleased to be here tonight to discuss the changes of Columbus City Code Title V regarding vehicle for hire, a recommendation from the Vehicle for Hire Board to eliminate the taxi moratorium. We will also discuss raising the application fee of $10 to $20 throughout Title V. Before we continue with the presentation and specifics, Public Safety would like to thank Mayor Andrew Ginther, Auditor Kilgore, Council, and especially the voters of Columbus for their support. We appreciate the continuing support of Public Safety and the License Section for the job they do in helping the residents of the City of Columbus understand and stay in compliance with Title V. With me this evening to help answer questions are Ramona Patz, Division Administrator for Support Services, Kelly Castle, License Manager, and Ben Lee, License Officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Patz, please proceed.
Councilmember Brown and members of council, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to discuss the elimination of the taxicab moratorium and the increase in application fees. For the last 10 years, I have been the chairperson for the Vehicle for Hire Board. During that time, taxicab licenses have been a highly debated issue at almost every board meeting. With the entry of many different vehicle for hire options, which include microtransit, pedicab, and TNCs, it has shown that there is plenty of demand for vehicle for hire services. Some taxicab owners have decided to change their business models and start their own TNCs, and that has allowed for some taxicab licenses to be returned to the city for a reissuance. Our standard practice for the reissuance of license is to hold a lottery. At the end of 2017, we conducted a lottery for 93 taxicab owner licenses. Any interested party could enter their name in the lottery. Of the 93 chosen, only 17 have obtained a taxicab license to date. The license section conducted research, and several members attended a conference on vehicle for hire to learn of the new trends in the industry. The benchmark for agencies the size of Columbus is to eliminate the moratorium. The opinion is that the market will balance itself out while attempting to level the playing field for the taxicab industry. Deregulation across the country is happening because cities are trying to strike a balance between heavily regulated taxis and TNCs who have very little regulation. That is why the elimination of the moratorium was brought to the board for a vote. So what happens if we have a swarm of people that want a taxicab license? There will be specific rules that will be in place. A license will only be issued if the applicant brings in a vehicle that passes inspection. Licenses cannot be purchased in advance of getting a vehicle. I will be keeping a close eye on the number of licenses that we issue. If the number of licenses issued starts climbing, then I will revisit a possible cap of taxicab licenses. As for the application fee, it should be consistent with other departments in the city. Other department directors have the authority to set any fees as needed, and the Director of Public Safety should have that same authority. Thank you.
Director Patz, would you like to also introduce your other members who are with you?
Yes, with me today is License Manager Kelly Castle and License Officer Benjamin Lee. And Ben's going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation for us today to cover the issues that we're looking at this evening.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So as Ramona had kind of capped, he just wanted to explain basically what it refers to when we talk about a taxicab moratorium. It's pretty much the limit that we have currently in place, 530, which was put in place originally in 1959. That cap came for a while. I think it was removed, and then for the last 20 years, we've had the moratorium on the number of taxicab licenses in the city. So we want to look at the current trends and the fact that there's so many different options now that have come into the city, none of which have a moratorium on them, such as the liveries, the contract vehicles, the TNCs, and microtransits. So the feeling is it's only fair to the taxicab owners if we give them the same opportunities to grow that the other vehicle categories have. So we've been, this is nothing new, but we've had for years taxicab, whether it's drivers or non-owners just approaching us, just begging for opportunities to become a taxicab owner. But with the cap in place, that wasn't possible. Now the fact that we had some licenses open up, I think the problem was we had to have a lottery, so it's a real slow process, and we have a long wait list, and even many people who entered the lottery never got their numbers or their names picked. So by lifting the moratorium, I think it'll give everyone that opportunity they haven't had. So we met as a board back on February 2nd. We held that vote. I think it was a unanimous, actually, it passed with a large majority. And then Chairwoman Pats went ahead and wrote that letter of recommendation to Director Pettis, who went ahead and approved the recommendation. And we listed some of the factors that were listed in that letter of recommendation, just factors that we looked at and reasons why we should lift this moratorium. Move on.
Let's go through those respective factors. I want you to take each one of them and just give an explanation with regards to each of the respective factors, please.
I apologize. I don't have the stats for each one of these personally.
Councilmember Brown, I'll address the factors. I'm
Okay,
the one
that's
that
fine.
wrote the letter regarding all these factors. These factors that you see listed have been used every year when it comes to a recommendation to City Council and the Director's Office about whether or not to change the moratorium, lift the moratorium, or let it remain the same. And I was consistent in this year also addressing these issues as well. The first one is demand. The issue with demand is we do not know what the demand is in the City of Columbus because we have no way to track it. We do not have a centralized dispatch, so we can't keep track of all the fares. So as we see it right now, we have a strong demand because TNCs are in play, microtransit. We have a lot of different types of vehicle for hire, and they're all busy. So the demand, I
Ms.
feel,
Pats,
is
if I may, TNCs, what does that mean?
transportation network companies. Those are like Uber and Lyft vehicles.
Thank you.
And they are governed by the state, not by the City of Columbus. The second is adequate service for the public. We are, this time, there's no way we can know that. We assume we are having adequate service for the public. We're not getting any complaints. And we are continuing, this vehicle for hire industry continues to expand. We just sat down with Chariot and Share yesterday that are interested in becoming a 9-passenger or less type of vehicle for hire. So it appears every week we are visiting with vendors that want to come into this industry, and they're finding very innovative ways to make that happen. The third was licenses versus revenue. We have no idea. It is an unknown. We don't know what the revenue is. We know how many licenses we have. We have no idea what the revenue is because they don't have to report it to us. The fourth was population. Population has grown 3% since 2014. Tourist population, we've had a 3% increase since 2016. New construction starts, there has been practically no changes since 2016. Total retail sales, we're looking at, the only number I could find is $11.1 billion in 2012. The city has grown just exponentially by 1 square mile in the last 3 years. Deplane passengers, we've had a decrease of 9% of deplane passengers and a 4% increase in hotel rooms. As for traffic congestion and pedestrian congestion, we know that's increasing. You just have to take a look at the Short North. We have a lot of areas, downtown, Short North, German Village. Everybody is starting to walk. We have a lot more people living downtown, so they're walking, they're taking these microtransit vehicles. They're taking C-Bus, they're taking the short rides to move around the inside of 670 and inside the inner belt. So those were the factors that, some by code, some that we have used every year, to factor in whether or not we should raise the moratorium. I'm sorry, eliminate the moratorium.
Ms. Patch, to the best of your knowledge, you said airport passenger traffic, is that up or is that down or staying the same?
The only thing that I could find that they have put out in 2017 was a 9% increase. And that's all we could find. That's all.
You said decrease before.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was a 9% decrease.
Increase, you mean?
No, it was a decrease. It was a decrease in deplane passengers. And I could not find any information on the increase on plane. There's deplaning, getting off the plane, and getting on the plane. And I could not find any information on getting on the plane from last year. I know that because every year that I have written this letter, they've always increased. But for some reason, this year, there was a decrease, and I don't know why.
If I'm not mistaken, they just hired a new airport director. Maybe we can get some additional information to provide clarity to that question, because I think it's increased, not necessarily decreased, but we need to be clear. Thank you. Please proceed.
Or as far as increasing the application fee, currently we have, most of our application fees are set at $10. We have, I believe, one category that's set at $18. So with this increase, we're looking to make it the same fee across the board at $20. This application fee, from what we looked at, has not increased since 1974, which is when the license section was created. And we just felt it was necessary in order to offset the cost of maintenance and support of our two main software programs, Medallion and CryWolf. And those are the software programs that hold the databases and how we process all the licenses.
A few questions, and I don't know if my colleague has any or not. If you want to wait till after I ask mine, feel free to jump in. And I guess this is probably directed to Ms. Castle. All right, and as well as you, Ramona, why now the time to eliminate the moratorium?
That's a good question. Back in September, Mr. Lee and myself attended a conference in Austin, and it was actually an international conference, but it was mostly all the major cities were present, and there were a lot of similar-sized cities to Columbus there. And so we benchmarked amongst ourselves about the changes that Uber and Lyft have brought to the taxi industry, and it's the same across the country. And there are many places where it's regulated the same as Ohio, wherein the state regulates the TNCs and local municipalities regulate the taxi industries. There's also probably more states where the localities, such as Washington, D.C., for an example, they not only regulate the taxis, but they regulate Uber and Lyft too. They had a lot of data because most of the cities are also moving to what's called a soft meter, which is an iPad placed in a vehicle based on GPS, and it works more like an Uber, where you can see that your taxi coming to you, and you get a picture of the taxi driver, and you know who's coming and how far away they are, and things like that. That's a trend that's going across the country, so it's a collision of technological advances that make people feel safer, and the reasons that they oftentimes choose TNCs over a taxi. And so to level the playing field for the taxi industry, because they were dying. In the cities that did have data, the data was showing that there was an increase of 2/3, Uber and Lyft were going like this, and taxi, we're losing money, and the whole industry was bleeding. We had anecdotal complaints and conversations with our taxi drivers for years. how do you deregulate? Well, the most obvious and easy thing is to lift the moratorium if A, we don't need one, and if B, it helps level that playing field. And we're one of the last holdouts really in the country of a city our size to have a moratorium.
What do you think is going to happen if we lift the moratorium on transportation patterns in the city of Columbus?
All we can do is forecast because we don't have data. We only have, anecdotal things that are discussed at Vehicle for Hire board meetings. Based on the lottery experience where we had 93 available taxi licenses and we only got 17 to completion, nothing could happen. Or the interest could have been there, but those folks who wanted to own their own taxis didn't get in the lottery. Their numbers didn't get chosen. So we don't know. That could have been a barrier. We don't know. We would anticipate at best that there will be some people come forward who have always wanted to own their own vehicles and run their own, have that opportunity. But we don't expect a lot.
You referenced briefly at a conference, eliminating moratorium in other cities. Is that the trend? Is that where everyone's going today because of the Uber and Lyfts of the world today?
Absolutely. I mean, you're seeing all kinds of creative deregulation, and that pendulum always swings. And we're certainly in a period where cities across the country are either trying to keep a taxi industry, or let the market figure it out, so to speak.
I know this is a recent issue with regards to the advent of the TNC, if you will. Comparing taxi license by the City of Columbus and vehicles working with the TNC, how would you draw that comparison?
Well, we're a highly regulated industry. The taxi industry is highly regulated, and we do that with the mission of public safety behind it. But frankly, we're finding that we're not keeping pace with technology. For instance, and it's something that we've spoken with the mayor's office about and are addressing. We do an Ohio BCI record check. We cannot presently do an FBI check, which would be a national check. People are much more transient than they used to be. Those record checks are not that reliable if someone has been a transient, person moving state to state. That's just one instance. The soft meter is another one where, GPS is extremely reliable now. Tablet, we know how to pay on Square and PayPal and all of those things. We know they work. The safety features of knowing and being able to have a recording and documentation on your smartphone of who was my driver, what the exact route was taken, what was the fare, what time did I leave, what time did I get there, is invaluable at times.
Are you getting information with regards to, you mentioned safety, obviously an area that's very, very close to my heart. Complaints with regards to these, I know with the licensed drivers, with taxicabs, it's one thing, but with those that are unlicensed, but part of the TNC, has there been any, and this, I'm sure it'd be anecdotal, but just to give me your perspective on concerns along those lines.
We don't have actual data, but we did benchmark with some cities that do have actual data. And there have been a couple studies. DC did the most probably robust study. And their rates were equal. There was obviously, you're going to have anomalies. You're going to have criminals who seep into any industry, no matter what kind of vetting you do. As it turned out, there were not much difference of a rate of criminal activity amongst the TNCs or the taxi. You know, we hear about it anecdotally in the media, but numbers-wise, as they have borne out in cities where they have actual data, it's about the same.
I'm going to ask my colleague, do you have any questions with regards to the moratorium? Not at the moment. The license section application fees, for example. How will application fees change or help your office, if that be the case?
Well, it will help bring us into the 20th century. I mean, since it hasn't changed since 1974. We do have some costs that we try to offset with our software and stuff like that. I don't think that's a huge fee, and what we're looking to do is become the same as, I don't know if it's utilities or Parks and Rec. There's a couple other departments in the city who the fee structure is kind of left up to the director or his designee, and we think that would be appropriate for our agency as well.
That would take us into the 21st century, I hope. Yes. How do you expect the license holders to react to the application change?
Well, we've done all that we can to put it out there, so to speak. We've told everybody via the Vehicle for Hire Board meetings, and they have representatives on that board. We also, and this is a really good use of new technology, we use the Gov delivery email system, in which we have the emails of each and every Vehicle for Hire person in there, and we can blast out a really nice little newsletter. We put it in there, and it tells you like how many actually received it, opened it, and it bounces back. I think we only got 13% to bounce back. It's pretty good. And that's very much an industry that is word of mouth. So I feel quite confident they know this is coming. As for the other licensee applicants, we brought it up at their particular board meetings as well. And for instance, in the case of food truck vendors or whomever, we also blast out where we have lists of their emails as well.
How long would it take for the application fee to be implemented? How long would it take to do this?
30 days after City Council passes.
Okay. And on the Vehicle for Hire Board, there are also members from the Tourism Experience Columbus. What are their responses with regards to the changes that we're talking about?
Change with the
moratorium?
Oh, with the moratorium? They've been present for quite a few conversations, and I don't recall any negative from them, do you?
Councilmember Brown and members of council, this has been a very interesting subject, as in we have had such a change of heart in the last 6 months on this issue that a lot of people realize now that there is demand out there. And once they realized that we could not fill those 93 taxicab owner licenses, they were more than willing. There was no discussion. They were on board. Now, we did have some dissenting votes from a couple of the taxicab representatives, but they were on board. Experience Columbus, we had yellow cab reps there for 25 or more cabs. They were on board, which they have been against this issue in the past. So this issue has come full circle, as then what's used to be the standard has now taken a 180, and they feel that we need to release this, eliminate this moratorium and see how the market plays out.
This weekend we have the Arnold Classic, and we have guests and visitors from all over the world in our city. Is there any way that you'll be able to get some sort of an analysis on the response of the TNCs and or taxis over this coming weekend? I know that's asking a lot, but I think from the hotels, again, we're expecting, somewhere around 200,000 people visiting our great city, and we want them to have a good experience when they get here. And certainly getting from point A to point B is very, very important.
Yes, sir, we are going to have presence at the Arnold each day. I think Sunday's the only day that we're not going to have licensed officers present. We're going to have them mobile in vehicles. We're going to have them on foot. They'll be inside the convention center. I'm hoping that we can get some feedback from them. They're going to be around the taxicab stands, looking to see what kind of service is being provided. We also have cultivated some contacts within Uber and Lyft, and I'll be contacting those individuals at the beginning of next week to see, because Uber and Lyft have blogs, and they put a lot of information out there as to what kind of experience they had, how much business they had, and there's a lot of information we can glean from those blogs. So I'll be contacting those contacts at the beginning of the week to see what kind of experience they had, if there was any negative feedback from any of the visitors to them particularly, and if they've seen anything on those blogs.
I think there's value to that, so certainly once you've been able to gather that information, if you could pass that along, as I'm sure you will, to Assistant Director Pashadi, and she can certainly present that information to the City Council. Anything that's going to have an impact on tourism and in the sense of making that a more positive experience, certainly I know my council colleagues would be excited to know. What do we else need to be doing to deal with that?
And also, I'd like to add that we'll also be contacting the microtransit companies as well, the pedicab representatives, to see what kind of experience they're going to have. They're all going to be utilized this weekend, all of them. They're all going to have presence. So I think we're going to reach out to them and just see what kind of feel they were feeling for their services. Do they have any negative? If anyone spoke anything negative about transportation or vehicle for hire in general.
Well, I think that's an excellent approach. We also have the NCAA coming. Women's Final Four is going to be here. Those events obviously are significant in so many ways of holding out our city from an ambassador perspective on why it's attractive to come here. And certainly from the convention business, anything that we can do to sustain that is going to be very, very important so that we can figure out what we need to do to continue to make things better, to continue to make our city attractive. So I'd be excited to hear what the responses are about that.
On the application fee, is that an annual fee then for the drivers? Okay.
Yes. For every license, yeah.
Every license, okay. And the micro transits, are they licensed as well?
Yes.
Okay. Just the TNCs are not. Okay. All right, thank you.
With that, with the staff presentation and the questions that I've asked, there'll be maybe others. I'm going to entertain public speakers. At this time, we'll take the public comment. I will call the name of the individuals that filled out a speaker slip in the order to which they were turned in. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Please share your name, address, and any organizations you represent before you begin your statement. I do have a speaker slip from Beyond Gola. Please. Mr. Gola, welcome to City Council, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, I have actually, okay. Good evening. My name is Bayani Gola. I'm the taxicab owners representative. Dear Councilman Brown and other members of the council, on behalf of the Independent Taxicab Associations of Columbus and myself, I would like to extend my greatest gratitude for giving us this opportunity to express our concern about the effect of lifting the moratorium on taxicab industry in Columbus, Ohio. First, while it is an adequate transportation system is vital for our city, excess of taxicabs would affect the income of the current 530 licensed taxicab drivers in our city. These 530 cab drivers have been providing transportation services to Columbus area residents without issue for over 30 years. Lately, with the advent of Uber, Lyft, along with Quota, we believe the lack of transportation services have been thoroughly addressed. At the very least, the capacity is more than sufficient to serve the city of Columbus, and therefore, lifting the moratorium is unnecessary. In the past, an attempt to lift the moratorium failed because there was no need to do so, according to the study conducted by the city. Because there was insufficient business, they decided to increase it by a substantial number. We suggest a similar approach should be taken, namely a gradual increase of taxicabs as deemed necessary rather than a complete lifting of the moratorium. Second, the recommendations to lift the moratorium did not arise from a public demand. The Public Safety Director's recommendation was based on two factors. One, a lack of claiming the previous lottery winnings by City of Columbus taxicab owners and drivers. Two, the fact that other cities with the moratorium had lifted theirs. We believe the reasons of the Columbus license section are inadequate justifications of lifting the moratorium. City of Columbus taxicab drivers and owners provided sensible reasons for not claiming the licenses. The city requires newer vehicles, but with the current business situation, drivers could not afford to purchase new vehicles to meet the requirement. In support, we provide a fact worth noting. John Glenn International Airport presented its annual statistics for the end of 2007 on January 11, 2018. The report showed that trips originating out of the airport had declined by 17.2%, or by a total of 30,589 trips compared to the previous year. The average trip from airport was about $25, meaning that the taxicab industry had lost $764,725 just from the airport. Because no studies have been conducted, it is unknown how many trips the taxi industry has lost in other parts of the city since Uber, Lyft, and their service in Central Ohio.
Please continue.
Okay. In fact, business for the traditional taxicab industry has declined tremendously in major cities across the nation. Major credible newspaper outlets such as Business Insider, USA Today, New York Post, and Forbes magazine have been reporting how Uber is forcing traditional taxicab industry out of business. This effect is felt by independent taxicab drivers in Central Ohio. In conclusion, we believe the reasons presented to lift the moratorium are baseless, do not represent the public demand, are insufficient justification for lifting the moratorium. We strongly suggest that a study be conducted. The study should include population and business growth within the city, whether there is a lack of transportation service. Our recommendation to the City Council is to increase the unclaimed numbers. Otherwise, it will cause long-time traditional cab drivers out of business. The result could be chaotic. Over 5,000 family members could request public assistance. We hope you take our concern seriously as you make your decision on this matter, and we appreciate your cooperation. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cola. Please, if you'll hang around for a bit, I ask Ms. Patz to speak to that issue. One of the things that also comes to my mind that is significant is that I know CODA has changed their transportation patterns from the airport to downtown. They've now provided a very rapid capability to get from the airport to downtown. That may or may not have had an impact for you. But Ms. Patz, how would you speak to the issue with regards to the ITAC? And I'm sorry, that's the Independent Taxi Cab Association of Columbus. That's who they represent.
ITAC?
Yes.
We have looked at everything that he's talked about, and the big issue has always been demand. And they have always come to the table at board meetings and say, oh, we're losing money, we don't have the demand. Well, we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years with the entry of all these different vehicle for hire types that there is a demand there. The demand is there. TNCs would not be a successful business if the demand wasn't there. Microtransit wouldn't be profitable or be successful if there wasn't demand there. we're concerned that, we talked this at length. We talk about it internally in the license section for hours. I mean, it's an ongoing discussion. We talk about it at board meetings. And I understand these concerns. I mean, we have been talking about for 10 years since I've been in charge. And I understand their concerns about their industry and loss of income, but we really don't know what their income is because some of their income is cash and it's not reported. So we know by what we're seeing and what we're licensing in the license section that the demand is there. And Kelly and I talked about it today. People are more willing to get out of their houses now and go places because they can get an Uber and Lyft, and they can get all the information on their technology. They know who's picking them up, the times, how much it costs. It goes to their email because it's being tracked. Taxi cabs except for Yellow Cab and a couple of small ones, aren't being dispatched. If they're getting a phone call on their cell phone and they go pick up the ride, maybe, we had a complaint from our own director that he hired a taxi cab to pick him up to take him to the airport, and they never showed up the next morning. So the issue is the taxi cab industry has not had a good reputation for customer service, and we've told them over and over again, you need to step up your game. Yes, there is a 6-year limit on new licenses for taxi cabs because we want to promote a professional environment in this city. We don't want a person that's getting into the airport, getting in a cab that's got holes in the floor in the back seat. We have to maintain a safe environment for them to get from one place to the other, a clean vehicle, a vehicle that's not falling apart, and one that's a reputable and safe and reliable transportation venue. So I think that I understand their concerns. This whole advent of TNCs or Uber Lyft has hit their industry, but they've been looking at this issue for 6 years. TNCs have been here for 6 years. I remember having discussions with Yellow Cab about this at our Vehicle for Hire board meetings and saying, it's coming. We can't stop it. They wanted it to be regulated. We tried to regulate it, and then it was taken over by the state. So I understand their concerns. Their concerns have been the same the whole time. And they were saying, oh no, there's not enough demand for us to lift this moratorium. Well, the demand is there. All these the expansion of vehicle for hire has shown that the demand from the public is there.
Before my colleague has a question, newer vehicles, the rationale behind the age of the vehicle.
Well, this is something that came about when there was another director in charge of public safety. And we were finding the vehicles were being put into service that were unsafe. We were getting calls from people, and I was a witness, then Director Brown was a witness, of the very poor status of these vehicles. They would come in and they would get them inspected once a year. Well, that was the last time we would see them, and they would be falling apart or they would have dents all over them. And we just feel a 10-year vehicle is about as far as you can go. They're putting 300,000 miles on these cars. And yes, some of these, they're no longer making that Chevy or the Crown Victoria that they were using, the old police cruisers that were so reliable. They're not making those vehicles anymore. And we are now in the 10th year out from those Crown Victorias. So those cannot be used any longer. And it's just unsafe. I mean, we looked at these vehicles. We battled through Vehicle for Hire board meetings. We talked about it at length. We negotiated with the taxi cab companies. We talk about it all the time. We have given them 10 years on a vehicle that's already been registered or licensed. So if they have a vehicle that was already licensed when the 6-year limit went into play, they have that vehicle, they can use that vehicle for 4 years, almost 5 years, until the 10 years is up. But we have to present a professional environment in this city. We're trying to grow. Experience Columbus is trying to grow. We need more tourism. We have excellent convention center. We don't want somebody getting into a taxi cab at the convention center or going to the airport and you've got holes in the floor, or the windows are broken and they're down, or they've got dents all over them, or they're rusted, or the paint's peeling. It was a tough negotiation through the Vehicle for Hire Board meeting, and with the taxi cab representatives were sitting on that board, and they voted unanimously for it.
I think I know that previous director. He could be unpleasant to deal with. My colleague, Emmanuel Remy, you have some questions?
I need you to connect some dots for me. I'm the new guy, so you have to excuse me for a moment. But I have no problem with requiring vehicle age. I mean, that's exactly what the TNCs do. That's the reason that people utilize them. What I question is, just educate me. How does where is the correlation between removing the moratorium and technology come into play? I'm not quite clear why that will, advance technology. So if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Let me address a couple of instances, and it struck me in Councilman Brown's last question. Uber and Lyft have a rating system, and if the driver and their vehicle get low ratings, you get, 3 low ratings below a 3, and they remove you. I mean, you're done. So, and they say that that's probably the reason why there tend to be newer, nicer vehicles. Yeah, because of the rating system that they employ, and that rating system works because of technology. Is one good example of that crossroads. Now, to be quite honest, lifting the moratorium, and the question was asked earlier, what is the impact going to be? We don't know. There might not be an impact because we're under the moratorium. It's not like we're sitting right at 530 taxis right now. I mean, we have plenty of room for growth.
I guess my point is that just because you release the moratorium, I mean, why can't they do this technology right this minute? There's nothing prohibiting them. Am I missing that somehow?
Yes and no. And like I said, Ben and I have talked to many other cities who there is a taximeter statute. It's a state statute here that says Weights and Measures has to calibrate, if you will, a taximeter annually. That's part of our inspection. And we have always done that inspection. Now, recently, NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they have lifted that requirement, but all vestiges of that are not lifted. And eventually they're going to that. They publish their handbook, a quarter out or so, and it's not quite yet published. Many cities said, you know what, we have scientific proof that GPS is accurate, and so what we're going to do is we're going to test these soft meters in our own, once they're proven to be accurate, we'll approve the soft meter. We're going to use it because there's no enforcement of the NIST standards. And that's kind of what you see half the country doing right now, is not waiting for that technical requirement to be repealed, if you will.
I want to add to that a little bit, where you're going to see the correlation with technology and the elimination of the moratorium more quicker. Everybody always talks about demand. One of the goals for us for 2018 is to seriously look at a centralized dispatch that the city would not necessarily run, but every taxi cab, independent or company owned, would have to be part of that centralized dispatch. That is the only way we're going to know what our demand is. Now, I'm talking about every vehicle for hire, not just taxi cab. I'm talking about microtransit, livery, contract vehicles. We're going to try to get TNCs on that. Now, we're working with smart cities with this centralized dispatch. It's part of transportation. It'd be a multimodal app. So you're looking at raising the moratorium. The big issue here with the independent taxi cab owners is they don't feel there's enough demand. Well, the only way we can find out about demand is to put something in their vehicle or have them have a tablet or a smartphone where the only place they can get their rides is on that app. So we can gauge demand, gauge revenue, keep track of the drivers, make sure they have insurance. There's apps out there like Uber and Lyft are using that you can actually get in and make sure they have insurance, you know the background check's been done. So there's your crossroads of technology. It's coming. We have to have a centralized dispatch for everybody in vehicle for hire. So one, we can gauge, one, I feel we need to gauge demand, of course, and is our supply there? Is there so much demand? Is our supply there? I've heard so many citizens say, oh, I tried to get a taxi, like Yellow Cab. They'll call Yellow Cab. Yellow Cab doesn't have anything available. They'll transfer it to Bobcat. Bobcat won't take the phone call. Or another agency, another owner won't take the phone call. So and I hear a lot of times on the weekends, I couldn't get a taxi today, so I called Uber. And yeah, I may have had to pay surge pricing, but at least I got a ride. So the demand is there. We think, we don't really know, but I'm assuming it is because of the amount of licenses we're issuing for all types of vehicle for hire. But our ultimate goal is to get a centralized dispatch system that every vehicle for hire would be part of, including the TNCs, hopefully, so we can start gauging demand in this city. We can use that for Experience Columbus, telling them what, yes, here's the demand we had for 2018 or 2019, and this is how we met our demand, and this was the waiting time for our citizen or our customer. So technology is just going to move this industry along faster than we thought, and I'm looking forward to it because we've never had any data in this industry ever.
Do we know any other cities, especially peer cities, that are doing a centralized dispatch?
Yes, virtually all of them who have the soft meter system do a central dispatch because you pretty much have to in order for it to work and collect the data.
Just to be a little bit out of the ordinary, I see representatives from the Yellow Cab industry here. Jeff, would you like to come forward and make any comments?
I'll answer any questions you might have. I don't have anything.
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to know if you had any comments. I'm affording you that opportunity. You're welcome. Thank you. As you've already heard, I have a keen sensitivity for this issue. And I guess, as in all things, we have to be more alert to the fact that technology has, I'll use the term, invaded every aspect of our lives. And one of them is also the taxicab capability of transporting a person from one spot to another. I've talked about this many, many times. I will say publicly that when I travel, I take cabs. That's what I do. I will continue to do that. And then I evaluate whether or not they are responsive or not. And that becomes a whole other issue. But we've got to be responsive to our community. And the City of Columbus is changing, and all the industries surrounding the City of Columbus has to adjust and change with it. I think once we see how things work this coming weekend with the Arnold Classic, and certainly what's coming up with the NCAA, with the Women's Final Four, will be special. We'll have some additional data to determine whether or not we are not doing things in the right way to continue to make our city an attractive place for people to come to live, work, and recreate. That's very, very important. So, with that being said, unless you have something else, Councilmember, in closing, I would like to thank Deputy Director Pisciotti, thank you, and her lovely daughter, Lucy. She's got her headset on, so she can't hear. Administrator Pats, License Manager Kelly Castle, and Benjamin Lee for their work on this initiative. I would also like to recognize John Oswald and Grant Ames and City Council staff for preparing this evening's hearing. Following tonight's public hearing, our City Council staff and the Department of Public Safety will draft an ordinance to adopt the recommendations of the Vehicle for Hire Board. This ordinance will then be presented to my council colleagues for their position on this issue. If members of the community have any further questions or concerns, please feel free to contact the Department of Public Safety at 614-645-8210 or my office at 614-645-4605. Finally, I would like to thank the community for their engagement in tonight's proceedings. This concludes tonight's Public Safety Committee hearing. Thank you all for attending.